On the 21st of September 2025, the YouTube channel Harry's Garage released a video calling for a rollback of emissions control legislation. This video made me a bit hot under the collar, a bit cross, so this is my reaction, my response to that video from Harry. Hello everyone, I'm Andrew, and today I want to give my personal opinions about that video on the Harry's Garage YouTube channel. It's entitled, "Car Makers Will Never Sell Enough EVs to Meet Government Regs. Here's What Needs to Change." If you haven't already watched that video, then you might want to do that first. There is now a link to it above my head on platforms that support it, as well as the usual link from the video description, along with all of the other sources I'm using. Harry's video is nearly 27 minutes and covers a number of different but related topics. I will try to summarise its themes to give my responses. I will be grouping some of the thoughts together just a little bit to keep this to a sensible length. The first theme is that car manufacturers, especially German car manufacturers, are struggling, with layoffs mentioned as a result. On the screen we see news articles about Mercedes, Porsche and Ford. And of course that is happening. Harry, you mentioned range, price and depreciation of EVs as the reasons for these problems. Most of that is fair, but some has perhaps become a little hyped, especially the argument about incorrect range. But in general, we do have some valid criticism here. You also mentioned the rush to the premium end of the market, and I think that's an important point. I think the reason Ford are struggling is that they rushed to the premium end with fairly expensive, luxurious SUVs, as so many manufacturers did. Some of the problems have been caused by oversaturation of a small segment of the market, the luxury SUV segment. I think that's why Ford were struggling. They effectively stepped out of their lane, hoping to replicate what Tesla achieved. But the problem is there are a limited number of buyers who can afford to buy those cars. I'd say that the boards of too many companies have made mistakes in targeting the same segment. If the board of a company makes a mistake, then sadly redundancies follow. That's the responsibility the boards carry. It's important that they choose the right strategy. Sometimes when a car company can't sell a model, it's because people aren't interested in the solution it offers. Perhaps people don't want EVs. But sometimes it's because it's not a great car for other reasons, such as a failure to differentiate themselves from the competition. Perhaps people just don't want their EVs. We shouldn't overlook that possibility. Hopefully this problem will self-correct. A bunch of manufacturers will find they aren't profitable in that segment and pull out again, leaving a bit more space for Mercedes. Porsche seem to have been unlucky. They were bitten by the rules allowing corporate tax to be written off when an EV is bought by a company. That caused a boom of executives buying Porsche Taycans, and then a bust when all those hit the second-hand market, too many for that segment, causing all of that depreciation we've seen. We must also remember that the German manufacturers have been impacted by a loss of sales in China, as well as those pesky tariffs in the United States. I think those reasons are well explained, and so I think you need to be careful about your conclusion, Harry, namely that manufacturers cannot sell EVs. I think some manufacturers can sell EVs, and the continued growth of the EV market supports that idea. As we can see in this graph, showing the percentage of new cars sold that are EVs, sales are continuing to build, right across the period that you called out. This graph, where I overlay the sales percentage in each year from 2022, shows the same thing, but even clearer. That topmost, incomplete line is 2025, clearly ahead of the other years beneath it. Growth is there. And this chart shows total UK new car sales by year. Whilst it's true that we are not at the peak sales we saw in 2016, 2022 onwards is showing growth in the market again. However, sales will be hindered by the higher interest rates, which hit us in late 2021. They came as a result of a period of high inflation, which didn't help either. So I'd say the dip in the overall market is explained by affordability. I don't think that this data shows that manufacturers in general can't sell EVs, or that nobody wants them. Yes, absolutely, it's a hard slog to grow sales, but we are on track. We are exactly where we need to be to meet the ZEV mandate. An organisation called New Automotive is tracking EV sales against targets for us, and they believe that the market as a whole reached the necessary BEV penetration needed for this year, as a result of the growth we saw in August. If they simply maintain these levels, the market as a whole meets its obligation against the ZEV mandate. That's great news. Even so, some manufacturers are struggling. Mercedes are a bit behind, that's true, but the VW group, in which Porsche's figures are grouped, are ahead. Stellantis are behind. They will struggle to make up a gap like that in just 4 months. They might have to buy credits from a competitor, even though they say they won't. The country whose manufacturers have the biggest problem, however, is Japan, not Germany. Toyota, Mazda, Honda and Suzuki were all too late to the market with their EVs. And Nissan really needed both the new Leaf and the new Micra to hit the market this year, not next year. Poor old Nissan are in a mess. So, to summarise this first section, it's true that manufacturers are finding the going tough, but mostly they are selling what they need to at this point to meet the ZEV mandate. Job losses are happening. The influx of cars from China and tariffs from the US play a fair part in that. But everyone having rushed to the luxury SUV segment with their EVs is based on decisions made by the manufacturers, not by the legislators. Some of the headwinds are affecting all fuel types, not just EVs. The downtrend in the market in 2020 was an income squeeze during the pandemic, and after that, higher interest rates and inflation have affected affordability. And listen, if I were the head of a manufacturer, I'd ask for delays to the transition as well. After all, there's no harm in asking. Lobbying is what it is, and will continue no matter what legislation is in place. Okay, so the next theme is that the mandates will not be achieved. The UK's ZEV mandate in particular. We'll never see more than 50% market penetration, you say. It's just not going to happen. I don't entirely understand the logic there. I totally understand the sentiment. We know that some people don't want an EV. I absolutely get that. I don't think we have any evidence that it's 50% of car buyers, though. There is a relatively boisterous section of car lovers who say it won't happen. I see them in the comments on YouTube. However, I suspect that there is a silent majority of the country who haven't yet voiced an opinion. They are busy trying to live their lives, look after their families, make ends meet. I'm sure there are people who engage with the car market only when they absolutely need to. That means there are still plenty of buying decisions yet to be made. Surely there's more to play out yet. A number of segments lack decent options, for example. It will be interesting to see what proportion it really is. I'm not sure we really know that yet. Maybe we should wait and see on that one. What confuses me, though, is what the proportion of people who don't want an EV will buy. As you point out, the manufacturers can't afford the fines, so surely one of two things will happen. Perhaps the cost of the fine will simply be added to the price of the internal combustion engine car. For those who are well off, maybe they'll accept that. For those who don't, or can't, their name will be added to a wait list. Manufacturers will have their allocation, the number of ICE cars they know they can sell. When those are gone, the wait starts for the next batch allocated. So I think people will end up with an option. Do you want an EV now, or do you want to be added to the back of a wait list for an ICE car? The manufacturers will hit their targets. They can't afford to do anything else. Finally, I want to call out that the UK government has listened to manufacturers on the mandate. Additional flexibilities have been afforded based on feedback. Furthermore, the electric car grant has been put in place to help sell smaller cars. That's a segment you highlighted as a particular problem in terms of profit, and the government has acted regarding that problem. The third main theme in your video is your solution, the trick you say that politicians are missing. Plug-in hybrids run on sustainable fuel. Let's have a talk about that. In that video, you tell us a bit about the sustainable fuel you use, which comes from one of your channel sponsors. We see a close-up of the barrel and can see it's Sustain Classic Super 80. Here's the page for it on the website, and if we scroll down to the sustainability credentials, we can see that it's a mix, as you mentioned, 80% sustainable components and 20% fossil fuel. But what's quite interesting is the greenhouse gas savings, only 65%. Shouldn't it be 80% for an 80-20 mix? That's odd. Never mind, they have a 100% sustainable fuel developed for DTM. Here it is. Oh, but that only offers a 65% saving as well. How about the 100% sustainable diesel? Okay, an 85% reduction. That's pretty good, but not 100%. We're looking for zero emissions by 2050. You mentioned that in the video. So is it not a problem that sustainable fuels aren't zero emission? Ah, well, no, you might say. This is the wrong sort of sustainable fuel. Perhaps you don't mean biofuels like this one, which are not zero emission. Perhaps you mean e-fuels. I mean, I hope you say that. Not only are biofuels not carbon neutral, we don't have enough feedstock to make enough of them for billions of cars. A reasonable proportion of the existing bio-waste is already used for something. So in order to scale big enough, we'd need to grow feedstocks, probably on land that should be used for food. And in fact, if we do the maths, there isn't enough suitable land on Earth to do so. So yeah, you probably mean e-fuels. But if we think cellulose-derived fuels are expensive at £4.50 a litre, just wait for the cost of e-fuels. An article from Goodwood's Road and Racing website from 2 years ago put Porsche's manufacturing cost at £37 per gallon. That's over £8 per litre as of September 2023. Now I take your point. We need investment to make it viable, to scale it and bring the cost down. But the cost will still not be very low. The process involves electrolysis of water to create hydrogen, plus direct air capture to get CO2 from the atmosphere, and combining them together. Sounds simple enough. Generating hydrogen isn't all that efficient that way, so it's a bit expensive to do so. But that's nothing compared to the other bit, direct air capture. Direct air capture, or DAC, is not entirely new. It's something being trialled at the moment as a way of removing CO2 to mitigate climate change. A story on Bloomberg NEF's website puts the current cost a little over $1,000 per tonne. That's about £880 sterling per metric tonne. By 2050, they imagine that could reduce to about $280 per tonne, about £230 sterling per metric tonne, making the cost of getting the CO2 out of the atmosphere about 60 pence per litre before we do anything else. That sounds vaguely achievable when you consider it in isolation, but sadly, when you do the maths, it really isn't. E-fuels are always going to be quite expensive, so that's perhaps not a great solution to hang our hat on. Oh, and of course, the greenhouse emissions are only a part of the problem anyway. The other thing we haven't tackled, not even mentioned so far, are the other emissions from an internal combustion engine, the air pollution. Internal combustion engines produce other pollutants, those known as PM2.5 and nitrogen oxides being particularly nasty. Nitrogen oxides are caused when molecules in the air fed into the engine combine during combustion, and so replacing the fuel doesn't fix that. Those molecules don't come from the fuel. PM2.5 similarly remains a problem. These are just really hard problems to deal with, which is why they are still emitted despite all of the Euro regulations to date. Indeed, dealing with those a little better is one of the reasons why Euro 7 is coming. This new legislation adds more realistic testing for emissions under wider ranging conditions. Achieving clean burning under a set of conditions is more difficult to manage than just the single condition we test at the moment. And that explains why you called for Euro 7 standards to be rethought, perhaps even ditched completely, because more pollution control means yet more cost and complexity on an ICE car. Air pollution has been falling for years. We've made progress in that respect, so why worry about it? Well, because of deaths. Is that a good enough reason? The latest study from the Royal College of Physicians estimates that around 30,000 people die in the UK each year because of air pollution, with an impact to the economy of about £27 billion too, as it happens. 30,000 deaths a year. That's not ideal, is it? If only there was a way that we could stop that, a type of car that didn't emit this stuff. Wouldn't that be something to get behind? Plug-in hybrids do help, a bit. They do some of their miles on electricity, but not all of their miles. They tend to have fairly small batteries, so their range is limited. When that is gone, they run their engines. Because of their limited pack size, they have to be plugged in more often in order to maintain their cleanliness, their electric goodness. That's a bit of a faff for everyone, but a more frequent problem for those who can't charge at home. What would they do? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, what am I missing here? There are a group of people who can't charge an EV at home. That's a problem for sure, I am very aware of that. But if they can't charge an EV at home, then they can't charge a plug-in hybrid at home either, can they? That's a car that needs plugging in more frequently, perhaps 3 or 4 times more frequently. I wonder whether the government might not be fixated on pure electric, as you put it. Maybe what they are fixated on is zero emission, 0 greenhouse gases, and 0 air pollution. Maybe their investment in JLR and Nissan are not the cause of them sticking to the mandate, but an effect of it. After all, the ZEV mandate is for 0 emission vehicles, not for electric vehicles. At this point in time, I think the government would invest in any technology that is a serious contender for achieving 0 emissions, both to reduce climate change and to reduce the deaths from air pollution. I want to read you a definition from Wikipedia. It reads as follows: a neuropsychological disorder characterised by a persistent and intense urge to engage in a behaviour that produces natural reward, despite substantial harm and other negative consequences. That's the definition for addiction. Does anyone else see the parallel here? It seems relevant to the discussion to me. Sadly, I think we've all been addicted to internal combustion, and it's harmed a lot of people. It continues to harm people, and it's going to get worse if we don't stop. I think it's time to reconsider. Yes, the car industry is struggling. Yes, we in the West are better at creating engines than China. Yes, plug-in hybrids that are run on sustainable fuels reduce emissions. We could roll back the UK's ZEV mandate and the 2008 Climate Change Act and the EU's 2035 ban on internal combustion and the Euro 7 emissions regulations and remove all modern safety equipment. We could recurse to the 1970s, step back by 55 years. Then we could have people buy plug-in hybrids instead of EVs. But that approach doesn't solve all of the problems. Personally, I think that risks delaying the European manufacturers in their mission, namely getting good at building EVs. The US manufacturers could be in big trouble because of Trump's delaying of EVs there, meaning they might fall further behind. I don't think Europe doing the same is a great plan for our manufacturers. Surely China are only going to get stronger. But the biggest problem for me is that this plan doesn't achieve zero emissions. That's bad in terms of climate change, the impacts of which will affect millions of people at some point, probably quite soon. But it is also bad in terms of air pollution. You said you find public charging to be inconvenient. I haven't found that, not at all, but each to their own. Perhaps though, might it seem a little cold, a bit insensitive to be driving around in ice cars whilst air pollution is taking people from their loved ones, so as to avoid a bit of inconvenience. I mean, that's not a great look, is it? When you think about it clearly. Could you perhaps suffer a bit of occasional inconvenience to save lives? Because here's the rub. People are losing their lives, folks. People like this young lady. This is Ella Adu-Kisidebra. She died of a fatal asthma attack just 3 months after her 9th birthday. Ella, you see, was unlucky. Her family lived just a stone's throw from the South Circular, in an area that was regularly enveloped in illegal levels of air pollution. In a document created by the coroner following an inquest, air pollution from traffic emissions was listed as a significant contributing factor in her condition. That was the first time air pollution had ever been listed as contributing to someone's death. It is the first time we officially recognised the harm it was doing to people, but it's far from the last time it will. This week I went to Mountsfield Park in Lewisham. That's where they erected the statue in Ella's memory. It's a fitting tribute to a life cut too short. You might want to visit yourself. It's there for everyone to see. But maybe if you do, go in a car with no emissions. It seems the least we can do to respect her memory.